Hello and welcome to Voices in Leadership, the LeadingAge Virginia podcast. I am Melissa Andrews, President and CEO of LeadingAge Virginia, and I am excited to welcome today's guests who just so happen to be our first men to be interviewed on the podcast. And it's episode number 10. So it's a nice round number to kind of change the dynamics on Voices in Leadership. So welcome Todd Andrews and Glen Berkel. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm going to ask each of you to just introduce yourselves, who you are, where you are, and then we'll dive in. But Glen, let's start with you.
Sure. Good morning. Name is Glen Berkel. I'm the Senior Director of Hospitality with EveryAge. At EveryAge, our vision is to enrich lives by providing the right services at the right time in the right setting. So we are a team and volunteers ranging from age 16 to 98, so hence a team of EveryAge, serving primarily older adults in our CCRCs, affordable housing communities, PACE centers. We have adult day, we have home care. A couple of our adult day are not age restricted, and we also have a daycare center at one of our campuses. So we are a team of EveryAge serving people of every age. So not quite womb to tomb, but pretty close.
Wow. Thank you, Glen. And Todd.
So good morning, Todd Andrews. You probably figured that I'm only here because I've been badgering you to get on this podcast for 10 sessions now. Since Melissa has thrown shade at me at multiple podcasts along the way the last 6 months. So I said, I've got to get on our own podcast to throw shade. No, just kidding. I'm with Asbury Communities. We're based in Frederick, Maryland. We have 9 communities in 3 states, about 3,200 residents and about 2,800 staff spread out in those geographies. We're actually in a process similar to Glen went through with some rebranding and a new strategic blueprint for our organization. And we brought on our first non-CCRC community last fall in Pennsylvania. So we'll actually be converting the name of our division, if you will, to community living from CCRC. So you've heard that here first. That hasn't even been dropped in our own organization yet.
Ooh, look at us. Look at us being the leaders.
You're getting the scoop.
That's right. Thank you for that. So I guess we should probably be fully transparent with our audience that we have relationships amongst us. So for our listeners who didn't pick up on the last name consistency, Todd and I are married, and Glen is not only a colleague, but a personal friend of us as well. So do you want to share just kind of your background as friends and coworkers and how long you've known each other and in what capacity you used to work together? And either one of you.
So I'll let Glen go because then I'll correct him if he doesn't say it right.
All right. So so Todd and I have been peers and friends for about 20 years. A company we worked for before, we were both directors of dining in the same district and area. That lasted for a while until Todd got a promotion, at which point he became my boss. So that was fun. But one of the best friends I have and one of the best bosses I've ever had. So that's good. Melissa, I've known for I think 18 years. I'm not sure if I met Melissa before Todd and Melissa met. I don't remember. But in either case, it's been a great friendship. And no, I did not play matchmaker, even though that is one of my additional duties outside of work. But I had no part in this one.
Todd, that was really nice. I don't know that you want to correct anything he said.
I don't, but I would tell you that, Glen, whether we had a relationship where he calls me boss to this day, which drives me nuts. And I'll say that publicly. He's
probably
called
why
me
he does
that.
It.
He called me that. Exactly. He's called me that for a year. I consider Glen, every one of us has that small group that if we were stuck on an island, we would want with us. And I would absolutely say that Melissa and Glen would be my 2 first people that I would think of to be on that island with for a lot of different reasons.
Well, thank you for choosing your wife to go to your island with you.
Well, I mean, somebody's got to keep me straight, right? So keep me on task. But no, in all seriousness, regardless of the official relationship that Glen and I have, I've never looked at it as a boss subordinate in any way, shape, or form. We were colleagues, we were partners, we were, making sure that we were focused in the right way. And Glen's one of those people that if I ever needed to check the pulse of what was going on, he was the first person I called to see, how the team dynamics were working and if there was challenges along the way. And he always told me the truth, good, bad, indifferent, and if I wanted to hear it or not. And I always wanted to hear it, whether he thought I did or didn't.
Well, it's nice to know that we have such a rich history amongst us.
I gotta get a tissue. I'm gonna start crying.
It's the vulnerable leadership that we enjoy. So let me just start with, how did you get into the field? Todd, let's start with you this time.
Well, I could talk for a long time on this one, but when I
don't have a long time, so you can just headline it.
See what I'm saying about keeping me straight and on task. So I joined the field. I've been in senior living pretty much my entire adult life in one capacity or another. I had a short stint in hospitals when I was in high school, but I ended up spending my college years living with my grandmother because she needed to be back in that time in assisted living or personal care, if you will. And as a family that wasn't in the cards financially. So I originally said I would do it. I would take, that responsibility on because I thought, wow, living with grandma, man, I'd have no rules and do whatever I want. Boy, was I wrong. She was a major mentoring force in my life and still is to this day, but we had a ton of fun. And we were, kind of a partnership that kept her independent for another 7 years after probably it was thought that she should be, in a group setting of some sort. So that's how I got in the field, and I've stayed in the field for all these years, supporting older adults in many different ways. You heard Glen said I started in dining when I graduated college, and dining really isn't my bag, but I worked in it for a very long time. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm not a very wide diet and not a really connoisseur of food that doesn't have red meat involved. So probably not the best thing for me. And then kind of progressed through the different things. And about 3 years ago, made a decision to change focus. I, for a long time, thought about moving to the not-for-profit side of senior living, and had an opportunity to come on board with Asbury and do that. And I've been very thankful for that change over the last 3 years.
Before I move on to Glen, Todd, would you just share an something interesting about your grandmother?
Well, I share a lot of great things about my grandmother, but one of the things that we like to do, she liked to do, and at first I would go along, but we used to go to like WWF at the time, wrestling matches, and we would sit in the front row, and my grandmother was the one, and it wasn't like they were paying her to do this. She believed it was real, and she knew inherently it wasn't, but she would yell at people and use foul language and point and all that kind of stuff, and I'd just be sitting looking around like hoping nobody was seeing that I was there to actually participating in such things.
I love that so much. So Glen, how did you get into the field of aging services?
So yeah, interesting. So just growing up, I always enjoyed being around older adults. Even hanging out with family. I certainly enjoyed my cousins, but would certainly spend time hanging out with my aunts, uncles, grandparents, so on and so forth. So just always had a desire to be around older people. I got into the industry actually by speaking at a funeral, which is not the typical way folks enter the industry. But actually, somebody that we both know, Frank McGovern, was the housekeeping director at National Lutheran Home. His wife, Debbie, was the admin assistant at Hebron Home for the director of dining. Debbie had surgery that did not go well, ended up passing away. I spoke at her funeral. Her supervisor at the time, I have no idea what I said at the funeral, but he decided Glen looks like somebody I want to hire. So started working at Heber Home, and not left the industry since, and will work in this industry until I retire or the Lord takes me home, whichever comes first. But did start out in hospitals for a couple of years. Hospitals are great for people that like it. I don't. I've been in the industry since 1996. I also made a transition a couple years ago. A lot of reasons. One, just I've always had a desire to work on the provider side for a variety of reasons. Also look to make a move geographically for the benefit of my family. And so did some consulting for a while, and about a year ago started working for EveryAge.
So what is it about this field that has kept you both for your entire careers and will, it sounds like, keep you for the rest of your careers? What is it that you love about this work?
Yeah, I would say I love people, but particularly I just have a huge passion for our seniors and older adults. And I have a huge passion for our team members. So one of the things that, I always said as a leader that I like to do is I like to help people grow. And I also like to encourage people that don't have the desire to grow, to have the desire to grow so I can help people grow. So I get that opportunity with our residents and with our team members, right? So our residents, in my mind, come to our communities to live. A lot of times we'll say this is the last place, that they're going to live. I guess that's true, but they really come to live. And I remember when I interviewed for a district manager position, I said this, and I believe this still to this day. The only difference between a retirement community and a college campus is 60 years, because they're all asking the same three questions. Who's sleeping with who's wearing what, and what's tomorrow going to bring? And so our residents still have, a great future ahead of them, and how we can help them kind of explore and discover that and experience that is great. And our team members have their careers ahead of them, and I enjoy the opportunity to help them develop that as well.
Thanks, Glenn. How about you, Todd?
So spending those years with my grandmother were very transformational for me, and seeing how you can focus and support and help. To Glenn's point about growing, while she didn't grow, I do believe it, having that companionship while I was in college and right after college, helped her maintain and probably enjoy life to a much higher degree than she would have if she was by herself. And then, when I started transitioning and looking for a job, and was fortunate enough to be hired while I was still in college to be the manager of the high school kids in a dining room, which is, I guess, how we all start. I quickly saw the power of intergenerational support that group of kids, who I've actually hired some of those in future, we can talk about that some other time, have gone on to be nursing home administrators and others. So like Glenn, it was, really seeing the value of the work that you did, and the support that you could bring to people, and the just as important part of their lives as any other, I think, is what it does. And now to this day, it's really helping and caring and delivering value to the residents that we serve, as well as the associates that we serve, which is, to me, equally as important. In fact, we've recently, and I stood at a podium and told our residents that we're shifting our value proposition a little bit, that the employees are going to be just as important as the residents as we go forward, and was sensing I might get a little pushback. There was none. The residents see it, they understand it, they want it, they need it. And I think that's what keeps me getting out of bed every day, is how to drive innovation and make not a place to go, but a place to thrive.
Yeah. So as you both have transitioned from your former organizations to now the not-for-profit provider side, what's that transition been like? Are there things that you've had to let go of? What have you gained? Just a little bit, I'm assuming that the cultures were different with the organization you're with prior and the organizations you're with now. So just describe a little bit of what that transition's been like for each of you.
Well, for both of us, it's been one very good thing is we no longer fly every week because we actually spent more time together in airports than we probably did on weekends or other times that we would run into each other or be traveling to the same places via air. And I think the transition, I can speak for myself that the main driver for me was just having more time at home and being more present, as well as the road was wearing me down from a physical perspective, and I needed to take a step back of getting my health back together. And I think the transition has been really good for me. I haven't missed it. I haven't missed the road warrior time at all. Maybe because of COVID, that just made that a little easier. But I haven't missed it at all. And I would say the transition's been very positive. A lot of learning though, different focuses, different principles, different things to think about. But it's really in my mind, it's one and the same. It's leading, growing, supporting people of various ways, shapes, and forms that really brings value every day. It's just a little bit different focus of that value.
What about you, Glenn?
Yeah, I would definitely concur with Todd said. So yeah, one of the things I have had to give up is my airline status. When I do travel, I don't get the free upgrades anymore, but oh well.
Yeah.
Now, also the transition's been good. Obviously there are some differences. I would say kind of a give up or a challenge has been while both Todd and I work for fairly large multi-site organizations, certainly not as big as a multinational company. And so sometimes, you used to be able to, hey, let me go grab this tool or resource real quick, and that's not as accessible, which is fine. I would say also the one thing I've gained is just balance, both personally and professionally. Part of this transition has been a desire of mine for a long time for a variety of reasons, one of which is one of the challenges or struggles that I've experienced personally over the years is there's just not a significant amount of ethnic diversity when you look at leadership in our industry. And remember having a conversation with Todd about that probably 9 years ago now, kind of exposed my heart and got asked probably the best question I've ever been asked when Todd looked at me and said, Glenn, I have no idea, what your experience is. I can't even begin to empathize, but you're smart, you're brilliant, you have a lot to give to this industry. And all I can ask you is what trail do you want to blaze? Which at the time I was like, you jerk, why are you asking me this question? I'm just looking for some sympathy. But the best question I've been asked. And so figured, there's many ways to skin a cat, but certainly more effective to impact and influence being on the provider side than being on the business partner side. So, been a good transition.
Did you have a response, Glenn, when he asked the question about what trail you wanted to blaze?
Not initially, but no, after thinking about it, probably another day or so, we began talking. And, one of the things I didn't mention about Todd is, in addition to being a friend, he's also kind of mentor, coach as well. And so really helped in not only just continuing to develop my skills, but also developing my network relationships and opportunities for me to continue to develop and grow.
So Glenn, how can we do a better job of recruiting and developing people of different races, ethnicities, backgrounds, gender, et cetera? How do we as a sector do better at that?
Yeah, obviously like many things, it's multifaceted. So I would say two things. One is there's always going to continue to be a need for ongoing just kind of awareness and sensitivity as we deal with prejudice, racism, the stuff that unfortunately will always exist to some point, but continuing to address that directly and correct it. But I do think the bigger issue has just been awareness. I'm excited to see things like what we're doing with LeadingAge Virginia in starting to target, the next generation in our workforce and just expose people that there are opportunities that exist within this industry. That, let's face it, like many people aren't aware of the opportunities in this industry, even more so, people of different ethnicity. So I just think the intentional efforts towards being visible to those folks, I think will help significantly, as well as having the tools in place to support and encourage folks when they do encounter challenges because of their ethnicity.
Yeah. Yeah. So, both of you have mentioned coaching and developing people, and I know how important that is to you in your roles and has been in your career. How did you develop your personal leadership style? Was there somebody that influenced you and you said, I want to emulate that? And kind of how would you describe how you lead?
I'll go first. I guess I would say I learned by screwing up a lot when I was young and thinking that I knew everything. When I first started, I can remember being 21 years old and starting my first job as a, full-time, not first job, but really a first meaningful career-led job. No training. They sent us to a class, right? And dumped a whole bunch of stuff and said, go back and, take care of business, so to speak, and learning by making mistakes, but also developing a style that people felt that you were a transparent person, that you had high expectations, but you also were willing to roll up your sleeves and be right there next to people at all times, putting in the time, the effort. I'm not a big believer of spending time in an office. I've never really had an office. I mean, you joked about an office, but it's really a room where I keep stuff. I don't spend a ton of time in there. I don't spend a ton of time in there. And even in all the years I've traveled, my office has been wherever I am that day. And I'm very comfortable in that. And I think that your style gets developed based on your experiences, but also based on the people that you meet along the way. And I can remember, as we speak vulnerably here, I can remember early in my career being sat down by somebody who was about 4 levels higher than me, the president of a division, and saying, I see a lot in you, but you got to get your blank together as it relates to this and this. And I'm going to help you with that. They actually paid for me to have an executive coach at age 24. Now, how many people get that opportunity to be able to work with somebody, and be vulnerable and listen and learn and have those experiences? And I was very, very fortunate that I had that experience. And it was because of something I had done that I shouldn't have done. And I knew it at the time I shouldn't have done it. But the fact that it wasn't a sit down, it was a coaching session, but it was really a life lesson session, which, sat well with me very, and I worked with that executive coach for 3 years. And I actually continued it on my own after the company said, okay, well, we feel like we've done enough on that front and really move on. And interestingly enough, she worked with Glen at one point too. That the value that I saw in her years later was to bring her back when Glen asked for something similar. And I never had one single conversation with the coach about Glen. And that's what makes it magical is the ability to be able to do that and grow as a leader and a person in a different way.
Wow. How about you, Glen?
Yeah, I'd probably talk about a couple of things. So one, as I think about leadership style, kind of a word I often use is flexible, and being comfortable with difference. A lot of that is just based on life experience, that I've had. And, I like to say, as long as we're on the same road, it doesn't matter what lane you're in, as long as we're going in the right direction. I think far too often we get frustrated because somebody's, not in the lane that I'm in, or we feel that they should be here versus there, or whatever. But as long as we're on the same road, inside the guardrails, and moving in the same direction, then we need to be comfortable with that. not only comfortable with that, but also encourage and promote that. Because quite honestly, we talk a lot about unity, but the only way you can have unity is if there's difference. I mean, difference is a prerequisite for unity.
Yeah.
So being comfortable with difference and being comfortable, as long as we're within the boundaries, is the way I approach things. I would also say kind of an important thing I learned is if you're a leader, then the starting place is irrelevant. And that's actually something I learned growing up as a kid. My parents are from the Caribbean. So my dad wanted to live someplace where he could grow his tropical fruits. I grew up in Florida, and he could also have goats, chickens, and sheep. So I grew up with goats, chickens, and sheep, and taking care of goats was a lot more difficult than taking care of sheep. But if I was going to care for them, it didn't matter where they are. And so as I think about leadership, the starting point is irrelevant. Our job as a leader is to move people from where they are to where we want them to be. And while certainly it's easier at times if they have a lot more skills and competencies and temperaments and all those things that we like to see in everybody, that would make it easier. But if I'm going to be a leader, and if I truly am a leader, then the starting point's irrelevant. I got to meet people where they are and help guide and direct them to where they need to be. And then to Todd's other point, continue to invest in your own self and development. I'm a huge fan of having mentors, coaches, counseling, marriage counseling, all of the all of the above is important, because we've got to invest in ourselves as well in order to be our best selves to take care of the people that we're tasked to take care of.
Yeah, well said. I'm like, am I a goat? Am I a goat? Is that what I am? I want to be a goat. So, one of the things that I appreciate about both of you as leaders is that you're not just focused on the community in which you work. You're also focused on the greater community. So I'm thinking of, Glen, you're now a LeadingAge Virginia board member. You are involved in our diversity and inclusion cabinet. Todd, God help us, is an incoming coach for our leadership academy through LeadingAge Maryland. I did not recruit him for that, just lest anybody think I'm playing favorites. He's on the LeadingAge Maryland Public Policy Committee. Glen, I don't want to speak for you're in LeadingAge North Carolina. You are also
A coach.
I wanted to make sure before I didn't want to have a spoiler alert. You are also a new coach for the LeadingAge North Carolina Academy. So both of you, for some reason, given your crazy demanding jobs and you have families, but you also are carving out time to be involved in your state association activities. Why is that important to each of you?
Sure, I'll start. It comes down to stewardship. When Sophia and I got married, the motto for our wedding was, the gift of love is that it's given to us in order that we can give it to others. And that's true about all things that we've been given. So it's important to steward whatever talents or gifts that we've been given, whether it's 1 talent or 10 talents. We have a responsibility and a privilege to actually steward that. So for me, it's an honor and it's a privilege, and yeah, I just have the opportunity to pay it forward, as well as that's also an avenue to continue to develop and learn and grow as well. So
how about you, Todd?
Yeah, and I would echo that, and what I would add is it's being able to always think about the future. Too many people spend too much time, in my opinion, griping and grousing about what's wrong and don't want to spend the time to do anything about it. And I think getting engaged in what you shared with the listeners, but also getting engaged in your local communities, getting engaged with groups that your residents are parts of, are all important parts of leadership in this field. And the community is not just the communities in which we lead and work within, it's the greater community. And one of my goals here in the later part of my career is to really spend more time supporting the synergies between the greater community and the communities in which we live, we serve our residents. I think that sometimes we have a tendency to forget how important that is. And I know firsthand how important it is to the residents to have that engagement in the greater community. And serving on committees is one part, but showing up is another. Showing up, being present, learning, listening. I agreed to be a coach in the academy, not to be, to be focused on the coach. It's what I learn along the way as well. And in the areas of constant development that you always have. And quite frankly, I'm always been a big believer of, you go to these things and you learn what other people are doing. So you don't have to think about everything yourself and come up with every change or strategy that you want to employ. I'm not above stealing and listening and learning from others. I mean, I think that's a better way of progressing, the field of aging services, is to figure out ways, to have synergies, but also learn from, challenges that people have. And I can just yesterday, I had a conversation with the CEO in Virginia about something that had nothing to do with anything more than understanding the challenges that they were having and how they were solving them. So I could, learn from that. And I think you have to take the time and put in the efforts to do that. And a lot of it's just in regular conversation around a bunch of different topics. I think it's really that Glenn mentioned network, and sometimes we forget how big our networks really are and what the opportunities for, call it what you want, whether it's sharing, coaching, mentoring, all those terms fit, but it's listening to whether it's challenges or successes from others, and helping learn and helping them learn, I think is also a good part. And this is a small, tight-knit community, really, at the end of the day. I mean, there's tens of thousands of people that work in aging services, but it's a pretty small community when you really start thinking about the connections and the interconnections. And just between the three of us, we probably have 5,000 people we all know in various different ways that we can call on at any time, and people are always willing to respond to that call. And I think that's what's cool about staying in this field, is I feel like it's not just a environment in the communities and the systems and the employees and all the parts of your organization, but it's the outside stuff. And it's something that really hurt during COVID is we couldn't get together with people and really, sometimes cathartic and sometimes, laugh and sometimes talk about real issues and help each other get to a better place.
Todd, I don't know if you realize this, but you have to actually read books to coach in the academy.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, there's books on tape.
I was gonna say, yes, there's books, and yes, I read books, and just
you do.
Well, sure. When I'm assigned to do something,
oh, okay,
whether it's by someone on this call or
right,
something that I've signed up to do, I will engage 100.
Always found you incredibly compliant. Yeah. Okay. All right. Just so we're clear.
Cliff notes still exist, or are they Spark Notes now? Or I don't even remember.
I have no idea. So what is one thing that you wish you had known when you began your career?
Ooh. Wow. I'll let you go first, Todd.
Well, there's a lot. But I would say that the two things that immediately come to mind is you go to college to learn how to learn. You don't go to college to learn the skill sets that are going to make you successful in any environment. You go to learn how to learn. And your first early career learnings, or every day you're learning what you didn't know. And that would be one. And then the other one is the power of relationships, the power of listening, the power of paying attention. And that's not just to people you work with, but it's also to the people you work for. The residents, are a huge wealth of information and support. And it's taken me a long time to learn how to harness that power. And I use the word power specifically because it is very influential in driving innovation and change. And when you have an idea and you start trying to execute against it, and you forget about the input of the constituencies in which you work with, you will have a problem. And it doesn't matter what industry you're in. whether it's associates, whether it's residents, whether it's families, whatever. If you're not listening to understand, you will be challenged. And when you're young, you have a little problem with listening. I mean, most kids today, I can think of our own daughter. We probably use the word listening in some negative context almost hourly, let alone daily. So I would say listening would be the word that I would focus in most on.
How about you, Glenn?
Yeah, so I was thinking about one of the things I wish I would have known or acknowledged. It really comes back to acknowledging that we are both needy and needed. So I grew up and still am fairly independent, not as self-reliant, but definitely growing up was very independent, strong-willed, self-reliant. I don't need anybody, nobody needs me, just kind of stay in my lane and keep it moving. But learning through a variety of lessons in my kind of late teens, early 20s, that we are both needy people and we are needed, really has helped shape how I live, not just as a leader, but as a husband, as a dad, as a citizen, and all the aspects that make me who I am.
Todd, we didn't have a motto when we got married. We might want to think of one. Like, what's our motto? I mean, Glenn and Sophia, they're so far ahead developmentally than we are, emotional.
Sophia is. she brought me along. Let's not get carried away.
It's true. Let's give credit where credit is due. That's right. A good point. It's a really good point. But well, you came up with our family mission statement. We should find that again.
I did.
It was GROW.
Why don't you recite it here for the audience?
I just know the acronym was GROW, but I'm not sure what the rest of it was. It was really long. And, mission statements, the best practice is 7 to 12 words, the first word being an active word. So that way it's memorable. I just remember the acronym. Just a little lesson for you on mission statements, should you need it. So I was on an interesting call earlier this week. We're starting a pilot here in the greater Richmond metro area with 5 of our members to really understand the voices of those that we don't currently serve. So we are reaching out into different races, ethnicities, the LGBTQ plus community. And the question that was asked of our Multicultural Advisory Council, who's helping us, who's helping facilitate this work, was, what do you dream of when you dream of home? Because that's going to be a question that we ask of diverse elders in the greater Richmond metro area. So I'm going to ask you, as you think about your elderhood, what do you dream of when you dream of home?
A place of belonging, a place where I am valued holistically, and a place where I can continue to live, grow, learn, and be me, and be challenged to continue to be a better version of myself. But yeah, to sum it up in one word, I'd say belonging.
Yeah. How about you, Todd?
Remember, this is public.
I know.
Stuff. I wanted Glenn to go first because he's so much more articulate than me when it comes to these kinds of questions, and it's always been that way. But I would say, to me, it's home. Home is where you get what's intrinsically valuable to you, and whatever that might be, and that is a very broad brush, and it changes over time. I can remember what was important to me in my 20s is not what 30s is not what, there was red threads within stuff, but the focuses change over time. And I think that's what's important. And, I think as you think about the longevity of your life, you have to be in a place that you're comfortable, but you're also in a place where you're are surrounded by people that you love and people that love you and care for you when you need it, and you care for them when they need it.
Todd, my response was dogs.
I'm sure, but as our dog here is marauding around the table, just looking at the door. And I can't get up because we're on screen. So
let me ask, do you think, given both of the descriptions you just gave, do you think as a field of providers that we are we're ready to serve you within our communities that we operate already? Do you think that we have created, as a provider community, your visions of home?
To some regard, I would say yes. In other areas, I would say now we still have some work to do, and there's always going to be work to be done. But I would say that I have seen kind of a more intentional focus on creating a sense of belonging. I've seen more self-awareness, and quite honestly, what's been the most important is I've just seen, honesty in people saying, I know this is important, but I have no idea what to do, or I know this is important and here's how we've messed up at doing it and here's what we want to do going forward. And I think, like any type of relationship, when somebody is sincerely acknowledging shortcomings or offenses, then you're going to be willing to work and collaborate and be part of the process. But you're also going to also being a lot more gracious as they stumble through that as well. So,
what do you think, Todd? Are we positioned to serve an older Todd Andrews in our community?
It's a great question. People have, I've actually been asked that by a couple of residents, as we're really focused about the future and what the quote unquote future consumer would want, me being a future consumer potentially. I think that we have some work to do in a lot of ways, and that work will never end. It will transition and shift. And I use the term intrinsically valuable to you for a reason. And it was because it's within our new mission statement for what we call well-being, and everybody's is different, and you as an individual decide. So I would tell you that I struggle with this. I've worked in seniors in one way, shape, or form my whole life. I'm not sure I would live in a community today. And that's not a knock against the community. It's more a knock against me. I kind of like the distance and the buffer of boundaries and, not having to eat in a common space and do things with people if you don't want to and have those opportunities. Doesn't make it bad. It's just different. And I think that there's so much value to what we do at the same time. So it'll be interesting over time. I often think about, what the community, there would have to be certain pieces to it that
you need 5 garages and you'd need land, and then maybe you're more of a home and community-based service guy. You're not really a bricks and mortar guy because you want to be in the country with no neighbors.
Could be.
As long as they have cheeseburgers on the menu every day, then he'll be fine.
Well, you can get that pretty much anywhere. I'm okay with that. My diet is, I can find something to eat just about anywhere. But eating's only part of it, right?
That's right. Well, let me ask you this last question. And I've just been so grateful for the time with both of you. When you look at the future of senior living, aging services, whatever you want to call it, what are you most excited about?
Go ahead, Todd.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm most excited about the opportunity as a career field for people that don't even realize it exists today. I think that based on the challenges as a society that we have with the pandemic and all the other pieces, the political divides that are out there, I think there's a huge opportunity for people to look at aging services as a career opportunity. And it's an area as a field we need to focus on now. And reach out now. High schools, junior highs, all that stuff. Things we talk about, we actually need to put action behind it and get people excited about the future, because it's not going away, right? It's always going to be there. There's going to be more and more people with different needs, and then the different opportunities that we have to deliver services, home and community-based services, advantage plans where people may never move into a retirement community, but they want the services from the retirement community, the different opportunities that we haven't thought of yet to engage with people. Glen had talked about all the things their organization does. We have PACE programs. They're called life programs in Pennsylvania. We have a pharmacy. We own our own rehab company. We're doing what most providers, especially large providers, are doing, is diversifying our revenue stream. So that brings in a whole new group of people that want to work in this field. And I think that's really exciting to me. And it's also a little daunting to me. And it's what do we do with skilled care, with all the, as Melissa knows, and that's my big thing right now, is I'm trying to position our organization around skilled care in a much better way than we are today. And I'm not talking about private rooms and stuff like that. I'm talking about need and what makes sense and how the finances roll with that, with all the challenges that are out there that we don't have time to get into today. I think it's exciting because I think it opens up to a whole different group of people that typically would look at aging services as a career field.
How about you, Glenn?
Yeah, so my response is similar. I'm really encouraged by, quite honestly, the young people, not just in our field, but quite honestly, culturally as well, but specifically to our field. Just our commitment to, and as Todd said, there's still more to be done, but I can vividly remember a conversation I had 5 years ago with an HR director about our need to hire some high school students for our part-time shifts in dining, and asked, hey, can we do an orientation on a Saturday? And their response to me was, no, we'll keep it on Monday. We'll just give them a note so they can skip school. And, that was, I wouldn't say that was pervasive, but a lot of us kind of had that mindset, and we weren't really thinking about how do we attract and encourage the next generation. But fortunately, that's changing a lot. I'm excited about what LeadingAge Virginia is doing with their internship program, and I think I'm going to have the opportunity to talk to some students at our conference next month. I'm still not sure how I got assigned that duty, probably the same way Todd gets assigned a lot of the things he gets assigned. It's
called voluntolding, Glenn. That's the technical term.
When
Pretty
you're
much.
Fabulous, everybody asks you to do things. It's your own fault.
But things like that are great. Things to how we look at. We're certainly much more intentional in recruiting high school students. Things and how, I forget which pay program it is that a lot of people are using now, where people actually get paid at the end of their shift. But really looking at ways to be more attractive and relevant to the younger generation, and being intentional about leveraging our residents to be involved in that as well. Todd mentioned earlier the benefit of intergenerational relationships, and that's not just having a daycare on campus.
Right.
I'm sure you guys do this at Asbury, but lots of communities have their residents who will do ESL, education with their team members, and just create various opportunities for the next generation, as well as continue to create opportunities for our residents to be engaged in continuing to mentor and lead the next generation. So that's what excites me.
And not to slight technology, I say this all the time, the pandemic brought a lot of things that have been very challenging. The one thing that's been very positive is the acceptance of technology is much quicker, more effective, and people are willing now, because they saw the values. If technology didn't exist during this pandemic and it happened 50 years ago, I think we'd have a lot higher mortality rate, and a lot of things would have been much worse than they were because we had technology. And that's just a slim piece of where it will be 10 years from now.
It's interesting. I'm thinking about the next generation, and between our two families, we have now 8 children, because you've added a daughter-in-law to the mix, Glenn. We're going to have to see in the next decade if any of them follow in their parents' footsteps and want to work with older adults in any capacity. We would be a nice little pilot. Nature versus nurture, right? To see if we've influenced any of them. I will say that when Eliza was in preschool, there was an assisted living being built on our route every day. I'd take her to daycare, preschool, and she did once. It was, what do you want to be when you grow up? And she wrote assisted living. I don't think she knew that, but we should save that and frame it so that one day maybe that'll be real. No pressure to our children, of course. But I want to just thank you both. I knew this would be a rich conversation, and I really appreciate you being on our podcast with us. I'll give you one last word if there's anything that I didn't ask that you wanted to share before we wrap up.
No, I think I shared it all. Good to see you all, and I'll see you all in a couple of, a few weeks. And Todd, I know I still owe you $20. bring it with me to Roanoke.
Yeah, it's funny how nobody really wants to talk about when I win pools, because that very rarely happens, but I want to talk about it more.
Thank you both for being here today. I appreciate you. So, Paula, our first foray into welcoming a different gender to our podcast, I knew it would be because of the relationships that we have, longstanding relationships. I knew it would be a fun one to record. But what stood out to you from the conversation?
It was fun, and it was longer than most of them, but this is the reason why. I was just so appreciative of their thoughtfulness about where they have been, where they have come, what they're looking for in senior living, and then they're speaking to their vulnerabilities at time, but most especially expressing themselves holistically as who they are, what they are. You don't hear that from men, and it was very good to hear.
Yeah. And I so appreciate that both of them talked about just the importance of developing people and coaching people. And I've seen it in action with each of them. But their focus on, this field needs to continue, and we need people to be able to do that. And that's like other duties as assigned, right? And the fact that they have figured out how to make that part of their job, I think is really inspiring.
And then it's from their past to what they have learned in their past. It's like, how do you then, continue that in someone else and growing them, like Todd got the coach for Glen. And so that was wonderful. Yeah. And I love Glen's analogy of let's all staying on the same road.
Yes.
Seeing the guardrails.
Well, and that, the reason that we're given love is so that we can give it to others. I just think that is incredible. I could have talked to both of them for a lot longer, and that's good since I'm married to one of them. It's a good thing I can keep talking to them. But Glen, both of them they're such principled human beings, and they live those values out through the work that they do and the relationships that they build, and also the complexity of each of their organizations. When Glen was describing EveryAge, they really are. Talk about intergenerational. It's just incredible.
Yeah, that's
just who, right? Well, I think another good one in the books. Yeah, it went longer. Todd's long-winded.
No, it wasn't Todd. No, it was great. I really appreciate it, as I've said, because you don't, even when having conversations with some of the men we work with, it's like you don't get that. This is where we got to see who they are.
Yeah, that authentic leadership is really one of the things that will draw people to and keep them in our field, because they can see themselves in the people that they are working with. And I think that's a really important point to make. So thank you for that. And thank you for once again being with me on our podcast.
Sure, it's been great.